All right, thanks for joining us back here at Kingdom Lyceum with our U.S. History with Mr. Peterson series. I'm Mr. Peterson, and today we're going to get into when Europe bumped into the New World and said they discovered it, and, the rest is American history, basically. So in our last video, we talked about the Native American people that lived in North America, eventually in Central and South America as well. And in that video, we talked about how they likely got there through a land bridge or through crossing the Pacific Ocean over time. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about the other people, not the native people of North America, that came into contact with this continent. This is actually an ever-evolving story in history, because the more and more that historians come across primary sources from different time periods, the more clues that they get that there might have actually been people from Europe, from the Middle East, from Far East Asia that actually came to North America long before Columbus did. And those stories include people like the ancient Hebrews, people from the Persian Empire supposedly had made their way all the way to North America in their travels. The Phoenicians, if you remember them from your Bible readings. And also, the great exploring generals of the Chinese Navy also claim to have found the west coast of North America long before Columbus. But when it comes to people who got here before Columbus, because we're going to talk about Christopher Columbus today. When it comes to people that got here before him, one person that all historians pretty much can agree upon as reaching North America before Christopher Columbus and his voyage was the Viking explorer Leif Erikson. Leif Erikson was the son of Eric the Red, and he was the founder of Greenland. And Eric's son, Leif, was able to take the explorations a little bit further to the west and eventually land in what is modern-day Newfoundland. However, the Vikings were not big on recording their history outside of oral traditions and things like that. There's not as much documentation. A lot of it is based off of archaeological finds in Newfoundland and the oral traditions combining together, coinciding with each other. That makes the Vikings, the Norsemen, actually likely the first Europeans to reach North America around the year 1000 AD. That's almost 500 years before Columbus. But before we even get into our buddy Christopher Columbus, we need to talk about the actual reasons why Europe was exploring. Why were they going other places? What were they looking for as they sailed in the oceans around Europe and around Africa and all these different places? So let's check that out here. The Age of Exploration, or the Age of Discovery as some historians call it, came about likely because of three main reasons. The first of those reasons is this: technological advancements. If you have a study of world history, you'll see the many different things that were being brought about by guys like Prince Henry the Navigator in Portugal, different tools that were being used, better compasses, astrolabes that were able to aid sailors in finding their destinations. Sailing technology had improved. The Portuguese actually invented a type of ship that was very small, very maneuverable, could be used over long distances. That ship was called the caravel, and that was huge during the Age of Exploration and the Age of European Discovery. And much of these technological advancements led to not only the discovery of the New World, but also the discovery of several other places that were previously unknown to European people. The second reason for the European Age of Exploration was the need for spices. That's right, spices were all the rage in Europe. Lots of historians argue that the Crusades kind of opened up trade between the Christian European world and the Middle Eastern Muslim world, and the Muslims who lived in the Middle East also had access to the people that were over in the Far East for trading goods and things like that. And eventually now all the world is aware of the spices. The spices could be found in the Spice Islands of Southeast Asia. And so now all these European powers are trying to figure out ways to get to the source of the spice so they could harvest it, so they could sell it and make profit off of it. So the search for a monopoly on spices really ramped up the Age of Exploration for European nations. The third and final reason for the European Age of Exploration has to do with the beginning of the mercantile system. The mercantile system would grow underneath European colonies as they grew throughout the world, but the beginnings of it were being laid here in the Age of Exploration as European countries were seeking to accumulate land for wealth and for power. If you owned more land, you were more powerful. If you owned more land, you had wealth in that land that you could mine, that you could harvest, that you could bring back to the mother country for the good and for the power of the mother country. So you can see why all these European nations all of a sudden are very, very interested in exploring and finding new lands, claiming new lands and territory, and that's where we're going to pick up here with our good old friend Christopher Columbus. So most U.S. history students are already pretty familiar with Christopher Columbus. You're familiar with his story about how he was an Italian sailor and explorer that had a crazy hunch that the world was round. It wasn't flat like everybody said. Actually, lots of people had accepted the fact that the world was round at this point. Columbus was just one of the ones that believed he could use the spherical globe to get to the Far East by sailing west. He was trying to figure out a way to get a voyage to the Far East, and he wanted a country to back him. He went to lots of different places. He went to Italy, he went to England, he went to Portugal. Portugal, oddly enough, decided to turn him down. They were more interested in the African coastline, but eventually he found some suitors in King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain. They financed his voyage. They give him 3 ships, the Nina, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, and those ships set sail. It's a long, arduous voyage. You can see the voyages here. The first voyage especially, he's not 100% sure where he's going. He's following the trade winds. He's doing different things that were pretty commonly known. His ship and crew get pretty close to actually mutinying and taking over the ship and sailing back to Spain. He says, give it a couple more days. They sight land, and they make landfall in the modern day nation of the Bahamas on the island of San Salvador in the year 1492. That's the story. We see that Christopher Columbus was able to claim this land for the Spanish Empire. He ended up sailing around the Caribbean and the West Indies a few different times, and in doing so he established colonies, he established outposts for the Spanish government. He ended up as the governor of several of these places, and under his rule he was very cruel and very harsh, and he executed many of the native Taino people that lived in the islands at those times. So Christopher Columbus brought with him the knowledge of the New World. All right, this was big news back in Europe, all right, back in the Mediterranean. Oh my goodness, somebody has found new land. They have documented, they can get back to it. They've always heard stories of new land. Now it's 100% for certain. It's being documented in history. So all of the positivity and growth that comes with the story of Christopher Columbus, you also have the oppression that comes with him. He actually ends up being arrested by the King of Spain and brought back to Spain in chains, and he lived out the rest of his life there after serving some time for his misdeeds in the Spanish government. But Christopher Columbus is a key figure in American history because he is the person who gets the whole age of exploration, especially as far as North America is concerned, kicked off. All right, another thing we need to acknowledge too about Christopher Columbus is lots of times his actions get tied in with the fact that he represented Christianity. And while that to an extent is true, he was sailing under the government of a Christian nation. Spain was a nation that was part of the Catholic Church at the time. And Christopher Columbus was also Italian himself, which is another heavily Catholic country. So what he is doing is he's bringing really Catholicism to the New World as well. And even he was not a very good representative for Catholicism. Yes, he does bring Christian influence, but lots of times people unfairly tie Christopher Columbus to Christian expansionism. And that is not a biblical concept at all. And the actions of Christopher Columbus really shouldn't be identified with biblical Christianity as we know it today. So Columbus does have a loose affiliation with Christendom, but he's definitely not what we would call bringing the truth of the gospel to the people that he came in contact with. Well, Christopher Columbus famously called the people that he ran into in the Caribbean and in the West Indies, he called them Indians because he thought he was in the Indies. That was obviously not untrue. Christopher Columbus actually was exploring for the rest of his life, looking for that passage to the Far East. He believed he was pretty close to it, but he also recognized that he was not there. It wasn't until a fellow explorer who made trips to the New World himself, Amerigo Vespucci, actually came out and said, hey, I think we found new land. This is nowhere near the Far East. We have found a new landmass, potentially a new continent. Amerigo Vespucci was the first person to make that claim, and a German map maker that was trying to map out lots of the findings that he had come across here from these explorers basically gave Amerigo Vespucci credit for identifying the fact that this was a new landmass, and he named this new country, or he named this new landmass America. Amerigo Vespucci is the person for whom America is named. So as you see here, Christopher Columbus made several different voyages to the New World and to the Caribbean and the West Indies. He goes to these places and he claims them in the name of the Spanish Empire. He comes with the force of the Spanish government, so he's able to kind of take over more or less these islands, and when he does that, now all of the profits that are coming coming from these islands. They're enslaving the Taino people that live there, causing them to work in these plantations that they're setting up, causing them to harvest and search for gold. Christopher Columbus and all of the explorers are always looking for gold, and pretty much anything they get, they're sending back to Spain in order to help the financial situation there and fund more voyages and get more opportunities for exploration. So basically, Christopher Columbus is most famous for being the first documented European to set foot in the Americas. It's not tradition, it's not oral history, it's been documented. He was there. Well, once word gets out that there's new land to be had west of Europe and east of Asia, you guessed it, things get pretty crazy in the international scene. Lots of nations begin to fund voyages to explore, and that's what we're going to look at in the next lecture. I look forward to seeing you then. So check back in the next video. We'll be talking about the conquistadors and the different people that traveled to North America in search of gold, in search of God, and in search of glory. So like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications so that you can be always learning.